Question of the day: what is your favorite building game where you're building something up, whether it be a society or an engine or something like that? For instance, like maybe a civilization that you're building. What's your favorite game where you end up building your civilization better, or building a city, or building a town, or something like that? Because what we're talking about today is the newest entry in the line of T-Builder games. This is David Turczi designed this one, who's been on all the other ones as well. But this is Tawantinsuyu. And yes, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but I'd like to point out, if you've ever heard, and yes, I know this is the Incan Empire, but I've been to Guatemala before, which is the Mayan Empire, the former Mayan Empire, and I've heard the language Quechequel up in the mountains, and it sounds very stilted and like harsh in how it sounds. If you're saying the word good, it's uts. It's a very harsh sounding word. So I don't know how to say Tawantinsuyu or Tzolk'in or Teotihuacan, but I'm sure it's not exactly like any of us Anglophiles say it. So let's just be real, and I'm going to call it Tawantinsuyu, and we're going to be happy with that, okay? So this game is all about building the Incan Empire. Here's a good overview of how to play. We'll come back up, talk final thoughts right now. So here's Tawantinsuyu set up for a two-player game. You have some workers that are already set out on the board. There are some parameters that you take out based on the player count, based on certain buildings and weavings and things like that, not to mention the amount of actual workers that get put out here. Now, the difference in this worker placement game and a lot of other worker placement games is you have a player color, but the workers are not your player color. They are generic and everybody will use them, but each one has a special power. Couple of main concepts about this game. You're either going to place a worker out or you're going to do a secondary action. In order to place a worker, you see the spots on the board. They have these different symbols which correspond to these different god cards over here, these Incan Empire god cards. So you're going to see the different types of symbols here, and that corresponds to the different places. So if you had this card, you could place a worker in that spot. The other thing is, if you had a gold, you could pay the gold instead. When you place a worker, you get to do the tasks surrounding that worker. So let's just say, let me zoom in here really quick. Let's say I went right here. Well, and I went there with that symbol. I would cash in that symbol. Let's just say I had one of these already here. I would cash this in. It would go up to the offer, which means people would be able to take this from the available cards when they draw back up if they wanted to. But let's say I went here. Well, now I have a choice. I can do one action adjacent to that space for the worker itself, plus an additional action if any of the player powers give it. So green and blue will give it. So had I gone to this space instead, I would get to choose two actions. So I would, let's just say I played a card here on this space. This is a blue worker on a blue space. I would then get to choose two of these actions. So let's just say I place the worker here. When I place here instead, I would get an action for the worker. I put a blue on a blue, which means I get a second action to choose these tasks. And then if this were a blue worker instead of a red worker, so let's just say this was here, I would get an additional task to use based on adjacent workers of the same color. Now that doesn't have to be, it could be any workers of the same color as long as they're adjacent to each other like that. So you could get multiple actions. The thing is though, you have to parse the tasks out evenly. So you couldn't do 1, 2, 3. You'd have to do 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2 as even as possible. Anyway, that's when you place workers. That's the most important thing. There's two concepts that you need to know when you place workers that will continue, and that would be the cost. There's the distance cost. I believe it's the, what do they call that? They call it the roaming cost, which means if you are in the segment away from your priest here, so I'm playing as the gray character here. So this priest, the high priest, is in this section of the pentagon. If you were adjacent to the priest in this section or this section, and those priests can move, by the way, it's 1 potato or corn when placing a worker. If I'm in the section completely away from them, so these two here, it would be 3 food or corn. Or food, basically, it's potato or corn. However, there's also a descending cost. So I'm building this top level, but if I wanted to build on a lower level here, it would be 0, 2, or 5, depending on the level that I'm building on. So you can change that by putting steps, which is what some of the actions are. Let's quickly go over what the second thing you can do is you can perform 2 different secondary actions. Secondary actions involve moving your high priest around a space here and taking the action listed there, and those high priest actions are right here. They're a little bit powerful, and when someone does one, the other players, kind of like Puerto Rico or Twilight Imperium, can take that action as well, albeit a little less powerful. You could do that, or you could pray, which means you'll take 2 cards from the offer, which is those God cards from the face-up offer, until there's a certain amount they reshuffle, or you can take blind. Training, you can take 2 combat cards, or recruiting, you can take a worker from the nomad section for free. Normally at the end of your turn, you can purchase one of these workers for a corn if you pick the one from this end, or a potato if you pick the one from that end. At the end of your turn, there's a 2 worker hard limit enforced. So let's go through what the actions are, and that'll just kind of give you an idea of what you're doing, because there's certain things over there. There's buildings, and there's technology, there's statues over there, there's more weavings that you can do to get points. It's a bit of a point salad game. Most importantly, you're putting workers out in order to gain these points. So here quickly what the actions and tasks are. These will collect the resources based on what you put them there, so you see those on the board. Construct a building. That's how you choose to build one of these buildings over here. So these are different things that are going to give you, a permanent bonus or a one-time bonus. They're things that, give you benefits. This is the cost in the top right, and some of those are permanent and some of them are one-time, like we talked about. The build steps. This means that if you want to actually pay stone to build steps, you're going to decrease the cost of the descending cost down. When you build steps, you also gain 2 potatoes, a corn, and 4 points. If someone if you have built above someone and they have built below you, you gain 2 victory points for that. If someone uses your steps, you gain a victory point. Next is build a statue. You pay 3 stone and 2 gold for a big statue. That's the big ones over there. Or 3 stone for a little statue. You gain the victory points immediately. You can cash those in at a different time to move up this track, and obviously moving up this track is a good thing. There's ways to do it here. You spend a statue here to do it. You spend corn to do it here, and move up that track. A lot like Zolkin and Teotihuacan, but you also have purchase of weavings. So you're going to draw 3 of those weavings over there, and you're going to place them end to end on this. It's a lot like set collection here, that you cannot have the same color, the same kind of, what is that called? The same look, I don't know, design, the same pattern. For goodness sakes, it's early. In a section. So if you have the same design, you have to put it in another one. But these score, kind of like 1, 3, set 5. So it gets bigger exponentially as you get more of them. So if you end up having a very long tapestry with all of these different patterns in it, it's worth a lot of points. But also, if you stack them end to end with the bonuses, when you take that merchant action, you get to collect the bonuses of the ones you have. Training is draw 2 warrior cards and keep 1, discard the other. At any point, by the way, you can use these to cash in for the bonus at the bottom, or this one has 2 workers on it, or 2 warriors on it. You're going to use those for one of these actions here, the conquest action, which essentially means you're going to be paying those cards to get these bonuses here. And this is an area of area control, or kind of majorities during the festival. So last but not least is the merchant. Gain rewards from all your tapestries, and then you can produce and gain the benefits from these. So the ones you have there, so you can flip over, gain benefits of 1 face-up tile. If you do it here, you can flip as many as you want face down to get all the benefits, but flipping them back up is the only way they're useful. Last concept is the festival happens when this is empty over here. First of all, everybody gets to take a free merchant action, produce on your tapestries. You're going to gain a reward from the temple, so wherever you are, sitting over there. You're then going to score victory points for the most conquest regions, and then you do the amount equal to the people who were dead here, and that's how many points that's worth. You're going to pay a potato for each God card you have in your hand, and you're going to lose 2 victory points for each potato. What a break from the -3, huh? Anyway, refill the village, and then draw cards to gain the benefits like you did in the starting phase. That's how you play Tawantinsuyu. You're going to play that until there's 3 festivals, I believe, the 3rd festival, and then once you do that, the game is over, and the person with the most points wins. So that's Tawantinsuyu. Now, as always, there is a unique placement mechanic somehow, whether it be putting them on a calendar, or whether it be moving your dice around a certain area based on how far you can go and hopefully building that up, or whether it be the pyramid, like pulling the dice from the pyramid for Tekinu, or whether it be this one, you're placing them around that central area there, and then you're getting to place them better or cheaper based on where your priest is. What do I love about this game? First of all, I love the fact that it's you have to evaluate your turns, but there's a lot of forgiveness. Someone could take the very space that you need, and there's a lot of other options. Albeit, they might just be a little bit more expensive potato or corn wise. Now, what I really like is that I like that the board sprawls and that it continues to build. The workers don't leave. So those spaces up top they're not available for the rest of the game unless you have the warrior and you start pulling people off. But you're really forcing you to truly build down. I mean, it really feels like the civilization is building down away from the central spot, and you do need those stairs to make it cheaper or to make it easier for your workers. I like the way this one looks. I like how it just kind of sprawls and continues to sprawl. I like the fact that you don't use the same color workers. I love this in Railroad Revolution. It's one of my favorite things, that the different color workers do different things, albeit they're still all workers. That's really fun to me. I like the point-sality nature of this one. It's just a fun game. The mechanics work really well. It really feels like you're building an empire. It really feels like you're descending. It really feels like you actually would need more work. So I like when theme in a Euro works together. And I'm not talking about something where it's got to be super overly thematic. I mean, this just works. It makes sense why it's more expensive to build on the lower levels than the higher levels. So little things like that I really enjoy, and I like how it's done in such a thoughtful way. I like the fact you're building the Incan Empire this time. I like the T game. I just like the T games. They're all good. They've all been good. So this one has a few different things about it, obviously, but I really think you're going to enjoy it. I think Teikinu kind of overshadowed it when it came out because it was, the obelisk and all that sort of stuff. I mean, they came out very, very close together, but I'm telling you, go try Tawantinsuyu. This one is a fantastic game. It's a little harder to grasp up top because you go, wait a minute, I put this worker here, and how do I take these tasks? So what do I do? It takes a minute to grasp what you can do when you place a worker because it's not a clearly laid out section of a board like all of the other ones. It's where you place it, you take the little actions around it. So if you need glasses or your eyes aren't the greatest, you do have to kind of lean in a little bit sometimes. But for that matter, it's not the hardest thing to see, and it does finally start to make sense after a round or so. And if you have someone who can explain it, it's a lot easier too. You can just say, no, here's what you can do with those actions. Here's what you can do with this, and then let people roll. And after that, they'll grab it. But really fun game, really just a good looking game. I enjoy it. I like the way that there is a variety thing where you can actually twist that priest area around. It doesn't change a whole lot, but it still changes some. I like the fact that there's still a majorities mechanic and there's still a temple mechanic in this one. So big fan of Tawantinsuyu. It made one of our golden games of the year for me. I'm Bryan Drake here on the Dice Tower. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, etc. at Dice Tower Bryan. Until next time, we'll see you.